Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. Here I am reporting from Colchester Castle in the United Kingdom. This video is about Matthew Hopkins, a man who's around in the 17th century, and he styled himself Witchfinder-General, though there was no such title. This was the height of the witch craze. Almost everyone believed that sorcerers, warlocks, sorceresses existed. So it was the time of the English Civil War, 1642 to 1649 is when we usually date the English Civil War, though there was a bit of fighting in the 1650s. And so it was a fervently religious era. The great majority of people in England belonged to the Church of England, but there was intense debate. Should it be more Protestant? Should it be closer to Catholicism? Not Roman Catholic, but have some of the Catholic practices, though not be controlled by the Pope. And there were a few hardline Protestants who broke away from the Church of England, thinking it was not Protestant enough. They set up the Society of Friends, or Quakers. Anyway, they were all united about one thing, is that witches existed. The Bible said that witches existed, so it must be true. You couldn't doubt the word of God. Many people believed in biblical inerrancy. There was not a single mistake in the Bible. It was all literally true. And they quoted a verse in the Bible which said, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," as you will not allow her to live. By the way, witch could refer to men as well as women, but over 80% of those convicted of witchcraft were women. Anyway, so Matthew Hopkins went around claiming he could find out who was a witch and interrogating them. He used sleep deprivation as a technique, and people would then start hallucinating, having been kept awake for 36 hours, often deprived of food and even water. So they would become very suggestible, just agree with anything that was put to them. These are people who are usually socially marginal, elderly women, particularly if they're widows, those who are paupers, those we now recognise as being mentally ill, mentally subnormal as well, things like that. The local weirdo beggars, people who muttered to themselves, lonely people who spoke to their cats and dogs, and he'd say, "This is your familiar, the devil appears to you at night in the shape of this beast," and things like that. So people would be blindfolded. Sometimes the old people would have growths on their skin, and he'd use a needle to prick their skin. Sometimes they wouldn't react, they wouldn't feel it. That's because elderly people can get these swellings with their no nerves, so it doesn't cause them any pain, or indeed it doesn't bleed. He would say this is proof that you are a witch, and that the devil would drink milk from you at night, even if you're a man from one of these growths. Could be on your arm or leg, not necessarily the chest. Things of that nature. People had sold their soul to the devil. That's what he was accusing them of doing, saying the Lord's Prayer backwards at midnight, things like that. Laying curses on people, because people really believed in divine intervention all the time, and indeed satanic intervention. If somebody fell ill, if cattle died, if there was bad weather, that could all be down to witches. King James I, who'd only died in 1624, he'd published a book entitled Demonology, as in a study of demons. And so he was a passionate believer that witches were all around and had tried to kill him by conjuring up a storm when he was sailing back from Norway in the late 16th century. So this is Matthew Hopkins. As to say, he was very handsomely remunerated. And the pay was so liberal because it thought to be an absolutely vital public service. These agents of Satan could bring calamity upon the community. And Matthew Hopkins published his own tome on witchcraft called The Discovery of Witches. Discovery, what we'd now say, maybe finding, maybe investigating, identifying, something like that. And these are some of the very cells in which the suspects were detained. So picture yourself there in the 17th century, awaiting your fate. Okay, obviously a bucket for your natural functions. It'd be very cold in winter. There'd be no light as there is now. Minimal food. Sharing it with rats and a few other broken-spirited prisoners. And in this country, witches were treated very kindly. They were hanged rather than burnt at the stake, although actually hanging might take longer to kill you because there was no long drop. They just strangled over up to half an hour, whereas burning, well, the smoke would kill someone after a couple of minutes. So that's that. So Matthew Hopkins would ride around with his retinue, and it was very remunerative, his work, with his whip, and suddenly start lashing the air. He claimed to be able to see witches that were invisible to others, and people then started to ask, how do you know so much about it? Is Matthew Hopkins a witch himself? But anyway, he wasn't formally accused. He died of natural causes quite young. He was in his late 20s, not sure of his exact date of death. He's from, I don't remember actually, but we're not sure of his exact date of birth. He was from these parts, the county of Essex. So that is Matthew Hopkins. Then in the early 18th century, the laws against witchcraft were abolished. It was said it doesn't exist, it's a nonsense. What remained a crime was pretending to be a witch, extracting payments from people on the basis that you were a necromancer and could use devilish power to give them good luck. But in Matthew Hopkins' time, people fervently believed that there were imps and all sorts of devils, witches and warlocks around. So that is Matthew Hopkins and Colchester Jail, where he detained many of his victims. He's responsible for the deaths of over 100 people.